of death. There it is. And we're live. No theme song
We just
yet.
did it. We just started. All right.
We did.
Nobody wants the singing. I think
There you go.
we've already established. I think we've already established that.
Hey, I think that was great. That was fun. I was very highly intoxicated, so
But you all got
it
to
was
stop
even more
scheduling
fun.
it during the EBN stream.
That was fun. It wasn't on purpose.
Well, he just scheduled another one during the EBN stream. Damn it, Daryl! Come on, man.
Yeah, Daryl, I don't know. I Because, honestly, we forget that EBN is back on Saturdays because we got used to them being on Thursdays. And now
Yeah,
they're back on Saturdays. So it's like, oh, geez, you forget.
that
I
Thursday
don't
was
know.
just wasn't very popular.
Yeah, I don't know. I got used to it. So, anyway, hello, everybody. I'm glad that everyone has shown up. Let me say hi real quick. Hello, Leah Rose. Hi, Arwen. Cookie, Sugar Cookie. And there's Fortune Cookie, Mark the Infinitely Tired. And hello, Christian Fandom Geek. Nice to see you. There's my partner, Daryl the Derelict. Hello, partner. Let's see. Oh, Phil McCracken's here. Boy, we're in
Oh
trouble.
no, he did say he
We're
was
in trouble,
coming. Yeah,
Matt.
he's here. I know. I know.
Chris Perza. He agrees Clone Wars is better. Yes, yes, yes. Uh, JT, what's up, JT? It's the Rissman. Yes. No, no. I do that too. Her and I usually when we stream, we're both highly intoxicated.
I
And
witnessed it. I can attest to that.
yes. Oh, good. I'm glad to see JT. We'll
Yeah,
meet you in
JT's gonna be
Nashville.
there. Yeah. Hmm.
I am so excited. And look, I can't even begin to tell y'all. I was so scared this month was gonna go by so slow
Oh,
because
geez.
I'm so excited for the end of the month, but it is going by fast, y'all. I'm good. I'm so excited. Chomping at the bits. I can't wait to meet everybody.
Yeah, the month
But
is really zooming by. But to me, April, for some reason, March and April always just seem to, when spring comes and starts, especially here in
yeah,
Florida, right? It's summer. Summer doesn't waste any time, right? So once
you're
we get
right.
past April, it's just too hot, right? So,
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and then you got the humidity
yep.
down there, and you got oh, you got to worry about hurricanes and stuff. I mean, we got the same thing up here, but not quite as bad as Florida with the hurricanes anyway. But it's been a minute since we've been hit by one too, so we are way past due.
When I moved, I never will forget when I moved here in 2016. That was on my mind, right? Hurricanes, and they said, "Oh, don't worry about it. You know, Jacksonville, very infrequent." Of course, we had a huge one that year, and it was like every year thereafter, it's been not hurricane, hurricane. It's like, what the hell? And they're like, well, I guess we were due for war. It's like, oh, really? Thanks.
Yeah, it's like, damn it, you cursed it. What the hell?
That's so bad. So bad.
Oh, so our topic of discussion today: Clone Wars versus Rebels. Which one is better and why? Well,
Hmm.
I'm on board with Clone Wars being better.
Of course.
And
The
and Matt
popular
thinks
decision. The popular decision.
it's not the popular decision. Actually, I was looking it up on the internet. I was doing a little bit of research just to see what people thought. And it's pretty damn close, and there's a lot more people that like Rebels better than I thought.
Mm.
But I think it has a lot to do with Clone Wars is episodic, where Rebels is one cohesive story all the way through.
Yes, so what we call Clone Wars is an anthology, right? Clone Wars, which I think is what you mean, right? Clone Wars is a
Hmm.
bunch of different stories of characters who are related, but the
Hmm.
stories are not necessarily serial,
Hmm.
right? And Rebels is quite a serial kind of a watch, right? The
Yep.
the episodes lead into each other. You're telling a much more directed story, right, with a core group of characters whose sphere of influence, right, or interactions obviously change,
Mhm.
as the series progresses, but in a very different way, right, than you experienced when watching the Clone Wars.
Yeah, and it took me a long time to be able to watch Rebels
Mm.
because I hated the animation style.
It's a shame, right? Because the biggest complaint, the biggest, the biggest thing I often hear when I declare that I prefer Rebels to Clone Wars is, well, the Clone Wars animation is much better, and I'll granted, conceded, agreed, right? But for me, I don't think I know I prefer the story that they're telling in Rebels because the story is a new story to me, and it's a very traditional Star Wars kind of story, right? When I think of the Clone Wars, it's not that they aren't telling interesting stories in the Clone Wars, but the stories that they're telling in the Clone Wars, right, are by design filling in and adding context, right, to things that have happened in the prequels.
Mhm.
And as a result of that, I think for me personally, I don't find the stories as interesting as which the story in Rebels is still unfinished, right? They
Mhm.
never really, and they are finishing that story now in different ways, right? As we watch
Mhm.
some of the live action stuff, which is an interesting way to finish. It's almost
Yeah.
it's almost reversed if you think about it, right? The Clone Wars story was finished for the most part in the prequels, right? In live
Mhm.
action.
Yeah.
And you know what I'm saying? And now and live action movies and those movies came first and the Clone Wars came second. And
Mhm.
we sort of have the reverse thing happening now with Rebels, right? Where they started a story with a set of characters in Rebels and animation that they've now been what we seems to be doing, continuing and potentially concluding parts of that story, or
Mhm.
at least filling in parts of that story in the live action stuff. And of course, today there's some Bryce Dallas Howard said some interesting things about Ahsoka, the Ahsoka series, and that the fact
Mhm.
that something like fans of the Clone Wars will be very happy with what happens in the Ahsoka series, which to me
Mm.
is a bit of a peculiar comment because I think the logical assumption would be that the events being told in Ahsoka would much more closely resemble or continue the arc that was set up for that character in the epilogue, right, of Rebels.
Mhm.
So so I don't know. That came out a little bit more rambling than I intended, right? But for me, I think both series I have love for. But for me, I really like the story they're telling in Rebels. I think it's one of the best Star Wars stories that they've told in the franchise, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, so it is one cohesive story. That is what I think more people like, the cohesiveness of the story, than when you got Clone Wars where it's episodic and you have arcs and each episode is pretty much an individual one. But to me, the Clone Wars is just some of the best writing, period. Not just Star Wars writing, but writing period in general. And I freaking love it so much. And it took me so long to watch Rebels again because of the animation style. But when I watched it, I really did enjoy it. It was like the Clone Wars for me, where there were episodes that I didn't care for at all. But um the Clone Wars, it may be because it enhanced the prequels for me. It didn't really add or take away from them, but it enhanced them for me. And it made me like them even more because my kids were just the right age when the prequels came out, and they loved them just as much as I loved the originals. And that's what got me to really love the prequels as well. And then when the Clone Wars came out and my son was, oh, about 5 years old, he absolutely fell in love with it, and we watched it together every week it came on. When it premiered, we watched it. We would anticipate the new seasons. We got the DVDs. So, that is why I think I love Clone Wars so much more. It's not just because the stories overall are fantastic and the writing is superb, but because of the time with my kids.
Mhm. Sure, it has a special place, right? You attribute some special memories to watching the series. I get that, right? I watched none of the animated series when they aired. I watched
Mhm.
all the animated. Well, I watched the original Droids and Ewoks when they aired. That's a whole
Yeah.
different story, right? Of these newer series, right? I watched none of them when they aired. I watched them all on Disney Plus, including Resistance, by the way,
I
and
never watched that.
I watched them, and there were some Lego ones and the Freemakers and any of the animated content which originally premiered, Star Wars content which originally premiered on Disney Plus. I watched on Disney Plus in true binge true binge fashion, right? So I'm comparatively speaking, I'm relatively newer to the animated series because we come from a time when you were told, well, you don't watch it. Cartoons are for kids, right? Once
Yeah.
you pass an age, you don't watch the animated series, and so I missed out on. I tried to watch a little bit of the Clone Wars when it was airing, and then I just moved away from it, right? And then actually I started back when season 7 of the Clone Wars was released, right? That's when I sort of gave it another try.
Mhm.
Then I went backwards and then had to do Rebels. And so I watched both series in very close proximity to each other when I determined that, again, talk about jarring differences in animation, right, between Clone
Yeah.
Wars, Rebels, and then you throw Resistance in there for good measure.
Oh,
Talk
yeah.
about all over all over the place from a style perspective, right? But to me, like I said, when it came right down to it, I like the prequels just fine on their own, right? If there was never a Clone Wars animated series for me, I wouldn't have had any problem with the prequels as movies. I'm still not the
Mhm.
biggest fan of the Phantom Menace, but again, I think that comes from an age perspective and seeing it and just wasn't quite the right age to appreciate it when it came out. But so for me, the Clone Wars were kind of, it was nice and still is enjoyable to watch. Some of the arcs, some of them are definitely pass. Don't need to watch them again.
Yeah, some of the really kiddie types. Uh, there's a couple of droid ones in
The
there.
droids, right when they're like,
Uh,
it's like they're Gulliver's Travels, right? If I'm remembering correctly,
yeah.
droids, they're like all, I'm like, really? Come on now.
Yeah, they go to all these different planets and then somehow end up with where they're supposed to be. It's a crazy story. But yeah, some of those episodes I really don't like, but some of them are just so good. My favorite arc, so I have two arcs that I just absolutely love. My number one favorite is the Mortis arc.
Hmm.
So when I saw that they brought that, not Mortis itself, but the daughter, the father, and the son in Rebels, I was like really excited. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my God, I know what that is. I know what that means. And I'm like screaming at the TV and stuff. And I'm like, I know my neighbors think I'm crazy, but I don't care. But yeah, there's so much stuff that was, I think one of my favorite parts of Rebels, and people say this all the time. I hear a lot of people say this. Uh, One of my favorite episodes was with Kenobi and Maul.
Mm.
That was just, one of the shortest lightsaber fights in Star Wars. But it just had so much meaning behind it and the care that Kenobi took. It was just amazing. And again, Rebels is great writing, but I think Clone Wars is a touch above Rebels, only because when they wrote Clone Wars, they weren't writing a cohesive story. It was just pieces of different stories, and I feel like they really had to use their imagination, even though Lucas was there and uh, Filoni was there, they really, really had to dive deep and figure stuff out.
I mean,
Where
I think I agree with you, right? I mean, what they were really attempting to do in Clone Wars, right, is I think they had a great opportunity to really humanize the clones, right? The clones were seen as very inhuman, if you will, or robotic, right? When you think about them in the prequels, for the most part, right? And so I think there was a great opportunity there just to sort of tell the story about the clones and their, their individuality and how they acted and how they functioned and differently, under the different leadership. And so a lot of the stories, really center around that concept, right? And the
Mhm.
Clone Wars
Mhm.
is a very, no surprise, it's a very war focused,
Mhm.
it's a very war focused set of stories, right? You can argue what war were they really fighting and what was it all for, and who realized what, and all of that stuff put aside, right? I think they tried to tell some relatable stories, right? But for me, I found it to be a little repetitive, right? The
Mhm.
underpinnings, and especially knowing the end of that story, I'm kind of, my mind would wander a little bit more than it tended to wander in Rebels, right? And of course, I may be a little bit more pro Rebels specifically because it takes place in the Imperial era, right?
Yeah.
During a time, right, where the Empire was at their was at their pinnacle, right, from what they were trying to accomplish and how things were going and just some of the intrigue and different things that were happening there. So for me, it almost feels more Star Warsy, right? Because I think Rebels to me is more akin to the original trilogy than it is to the prequels, right? And that's part of the
Mhm.
reason why I've enjoyed some of the stuff that's in the Mandoverse so much, and even the Bad Batch for that matter, which I know, the Bad Batch sort of was a rattle for a lot of folks, and some folks are really turned off by Omega and the side missions, but I try and think about, again, that story in the context of the rise of
Mhm.
the Imperial era and some of the things that are happening there at the beginning. And just like they brought in Thrawn and did some things at the end of
Yes.
Rebels, right now we're starting to see some of that stuff starting up in the Bad Batch, and I think we're in for a treat in season 2 of that program. So I hope folks do give it another try, right, when
Mhm.
season 2 comes out, because I think they'll go in a direction that people will probably enjoy
Mhm.
if they're going to watch it, right? So, you know, the writing is excellent in these animated series, right? They're especially some of the things that they do in Rebels, some of the ways in which Ezra and Kanan interact, and how those characters grow,
Mhm.
and just the way they learn things about good and evil, Jedi and Sith, especially when you think about Ezra and Maul's interaction. It's a very
Mhm.
different, well, maybe it isn't, but some would argue it's a very different Maul portrayed in Rebels, culminating
Oh
in
yeah, I
the
think so.
Sons episode. And and you realize in some ways how much the same Maul and Kenobi really are. And there's things about Kenobi, I think, that people idolize, right? And I hear this a lot lately, right? When we start to hear things about a broken Kenobi in the Kenobi series, and how should Obi-Wan Kenobi act, and what do we think about from a Kenobi perspective, right? We tend to think about Kenobi in A New Hope, right? If we
Mhm.
don't think about Kenobi in Revenge of the Sith, right? We tend to think about Kenobi in A New Hope, but I would offer for strong consideration, right, that Kenobi was largely a failure for the majority of the prequels. Yes, he was
Yeah.
an excellent general, and he fought well, and he was quite courageous in the Clone Wars. But when you really think about what it was Kenobi was supposed to be accomplishing as a Jedi, he was an absolute failure.
Mhm. He was.
Right, and so it's a hard one for me, for people, when I hear people say, "Well, he needs to be hot shit and top of his top, and he needs to be bopping around and doing great things," right?
Mm-mm.
when we see him when we see him in the Kenobi series, he and Yoda fucked it up big time,
Yeah, they did.
big time,
Big time.
right? And so I'm kind of like, yeah, by the time we see him in A New Hope, he's ready to do what's necessary. And I would offer the first time he's probably truly heroic is in A New Hope, right? He finally fulfills the destiny, I think, that he was led to fulfill through those activities, right? I don't think that negates him being able to do other great things between the time of Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, right? But his character arc for the majority of the prequels was the same, right? He didn't really have an arc.
Yeah. I would. I think that Kenobi. Uh, I think everyone is of that mindset, like you just said, and I think Kenobi, we're gonna see him going through some shit. And I hear people say, like I've watched X Wing's channel, and I hear people saying, no, he's a Jedi. He shouldn't be depressed or PTSD or whatever. But no, he's a human. It doesn't matter that he used to be a Jedi because Jedi are gone. Yeah, Jedi are, it's not a thing anymore. He's human and he's gonna go through those damn human emotions. He's gonna feel his failures because, like you said, he failed big time. And then he saw his best friend, his brother, burn up. And for all he knows at that point, he's dead. He cut off his limbs and burned him up, right? Watched him burn. That's horrible to have to watch. And then walk away and feel that. And then to know that his children have to grow up without not only their mother but their father too. Yeah, they got replacements, quote unquote, but it's not the same. And the kids grow up apart from each other, and he this is all crap that he is going to have to deal with, and it's going to take a toll on anybody, Jedi or not. It's going to take a toll on him, y'all. I'm telling you, we're going to see he is going to be broken, but I completely expect to see that because how do you get from Revenge of the Sith Kenobi over to A New Hope Kenobi? There's a pathway there.
Or
And
I would even argue that I had a point actually, and I just got back to it in my mind. The Kenobi that we see in the Twin Suns, right?
yeah.
That Kenobi is still progressing towards the Kenobi that we see in A New Hope, right? And
Mhm.
his conclusion of his business with Maul was a very important part of that process because he kind of screwed it up. He screwed the Maul thing up too. Again, people in the chat are hating me, I know, but if you really think critically back to Kenobi's performance as depicted in everything we've seen up to this point, right? Whether it's been in the prequels or whether it's been in the Clone Wars, again, he was fearless, right, for the majority of it, right? You can't dispute that fact, right? And the fact that he was willing to die for what he believed was the concept of the Republic and what he believed the Jedi Order stood for. I'm not diminishing
Mm-mm.
his motivation. He just didn't do a great job of it.
Mm-mm.
And
The one thing that really irritated me about Kenobi um was he always, is it what the council said to do? This isn't what the council said. The council did this. The council. Did he learn nothing from Qui-Gon? Qui-Gon was the first one to say, The council isn't always right. That's why I'm not sitting on the council," you know? And here's Obi-Wan just going along with everything that they say, and we see the end results of that.
yeah,
So I know he probably believed he was part of something great, but hindsight is always 2020, and we can hope in this series he is reflecting upon that and seeing, yeah, so it wasn't all that I thought it was, and yeah, there was some bad stuff in it, and maybe other people were right, but not completely right. I don't know. But I do fully expect Kenobi is going to be just freaking dealing with a whole lot of shit.
And in the series, he's going to be confronted with other previous Jedi,
Yeah.
right? Whether that's
Mace.
Jedi who are still trying to keep the dream alive,
Yeah.
right? Or Jedi who have taken a very dark path,
Mhm.
right? Potentially not by their choosing, right? But because the alternative was death.
Death. Mhm.
And I think, talk about kicking a guy when he's down, right? I mean, he's not over all of the failures, even after 10 years. And now here they are smacking him upside the face again, right? While he's trying to accomplish the only mission that he was left with,
Oh,
right? And so I think from his standpoint, his only reason for being, and I, Phil always hates it when I do this, right? But I
is
think
it?
is really twofold, right? He needs to protect Luke, and he also needs to protect Leia. He has a responsibility to both children, right? I think the guy has just lost his mojo, right?
Mhm.
And I for me personally, seeing how he gets that back and continues to grow into the old Ben Kenobi, whether he was an old hermit and a little peculiar or not, who wouldn't be, right? But whether he
Exactly.
when he matures into the figure that we revere in A New Hope, I'd I'd like to see how he earned that reverence, because up to this point, he really hasn't earned it.
No, he hasn't.
He didn't. I mean, and so not to mention, he still didn't make some great choices, even as you move from A New Hope to Empire Strikes Back,
Yeah.
right? And the way he treated Luke, and the
Mhm.
whole telling him about Vader, not telling him about Vader, and not agreeing with Yoda on that, and they just still weren't even really doing it that well after all
Yeah.
that time.
I think Leia doesn't agree with something.
She doesn't. She doesn't. I think people generally speaking, and I get it, by the way, they don't characterize Obi-Wan Kenobi as a failure.
Yeah, but he was. He was a complete failure.
In the worst possible way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Jedi Order failed. He failed to kill uh Anakin, Darth Vader. And of course, Leia always there's no difference here than the vac tube. Speak freely. Um we think you're both nuts. Well,
Off our
because
rockers.
uh, you know, come on, y'all. And now Kenobi, at the end of the day, he's still human, regardless of if he's a Jedi. So yeah, we know from the Clone Wars that he and Satine, he almost walked away from the Jedi Order because of Satine. He's human. He didn't, and the only reason that he didn't is because Satine never told him how she felt. Had she told him, he would have walked away and left the Jedi Order. So, you know, failures across the board for not talking to her and seeing, do you feel this way or whatever, and then going on with the Jedi Order and going along with everything that Council says and failing to do his job and dispose of Vader and all of that. But um, I lost my point. Shit. Oh shit. Oh god.
Again, I
Okay.
think I
Talk
think
about
that
something because I lost my point.
the again, I don't dispute the fact that Obi-Wan has heroic qualities, right?
Hmm.
Being a hero doesn't necessarily mean you're successful. right?
Exactly.
And in this particular case, part of the reason why Kenobi was so heroic from a combat standpoint was his mastery of lightsaber technique, right?
Mhm.
And the way in which he was able, to tap into the force, to do things, that were almost supernatural. I guess they would be considered supernatural, right? From a combat perspective. And this is why the Jedi, generally speaking, were excellent combatants, right? It
Mhm.
wasn't supposed to be their purpose, right? And isn't the reason why that they trained with lightsabers necessarily, right? But again, when you think about Obi-Wan as a teacher, right, and some of the things that he was expected to do, especially with Anakin and more broadly in preservation of the Jedi Order, he didn't do a great job with those things.
Mm-mm. He didn't. And Phil, to your point here, yes, you follow orders, but Obi-Wan learned nothing. I said this before. He learned nothing from Qui-Gon. Qui-Gon followed orders, but he did it his way. The council told him to do something. He did it his way, the way that he thought was appropriate, not exactly note for note the way Kenobi did, which is the way the council said to do it, right? So, and there are times when you're given orders and the orders are n- just horrible orders and you don't follow those orders, because it's not right. It's not the right thing to do. And that was Qui-Gon's whole thing is Qui-Gon, the council isn't always right. They tell you to do something, but is it the right thing to do? Qui-Gon followed what the right thing to do was, the true Jedi, correct, right, good thing to do. And the council just said to go do it. It didn't matter. Just go freaking do it. And that's why I think Obi-Wan didn't really learn anything from Qui-Gon. Um, because the council said do it and didn't matter if it was right or wrong, he went and did it.
Well, and I think the point that Leia is making is spot on, right? People saw Qui-Gon and the way that he acted as rebellious,
Mhm.
right? They saw his nonconformity as something that was dangerous because it wasn't in keeping with the generally accepted way
Mhm.
in which the council chose to do business, right? It turns out from how it all worked out, it would seem that Qui-Gon had the right idea,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And so I think from my perspective, I mean, I wouldn't say, please don't misunderstand me when I say Kenobi was a failure. He wasn't the only failure, right?
Yoda
But
too.
Yoda and the whole lot of them were arrogantly congratulating each other
Mhm.
on their way of doing things, right? Um, it's just, and that enabled, as we know, the Sith to take root and the Empire to rise. Um, might
Mhm.
say Kenobi did a great job of helping the Empire to rise, right? And accepting and commissioning the clone army and doing a
Mhm.
lot of other things
Yeah.
that ended up being quite detrimental, right, to their to their broader objective of
Mhm.
peace in the galaxy and perpetuating the Jedi way, right?
Mhm.
It just wasn't a good show in the way the events unfolded, right? And so I think the reason why part of the reason why the Rebel story does resonate so much with me is because we're seeing the ramifications of those things continue to play out, right?
Mhm.
And again, it's not that the Clone Wars stories are anthologically unpleasant, right? They're most of them are interesting to watch, and it's not like I thought, oh my god, this is torture. Maybe the little Lilliputians and the again the droids all maybe that was too much for me, but okay, it's one arc, right? but it's like I know where all this is going, I know where all this ends up. There was a certain amount of pain, I think, in watching some of that, just understanding what the culmination of those events were.
Yeah. The one thing that I really, really appreciated about the Clone Wars was you really got to see the relationship between Obi-Wan and Anakin. So when they talk about, you're my brother, and he's like a father to me, and the prequels, and they say that they've had this great relationship, but you don't really see that a whole lot in any of the movies, which you can't because time constraints and everything. But I think seeing that relationship between them, it's like you said, we know how it ends. And it makes that ending when Obi-Wan says, "You are my brother, Anakin, and I loved you." That is just so much more heart-wrenching because of the Clone Wars, because you see the relationship that they really did have. Um, and that was one thing that I really appreciated about it. It just gave certain little nuggets to improve upon. It didn't add anything, it didn't take away anything. To me, it just gave little nuggets to improve upon the story itself, and give you a little more perspective to inside of when Obi-Wan is saying this, he really means it. They really were extremely close. And that's another reason I say we're going to see Kenobi going through some PTSD moments, and having nightmares, and waking up to seeing Anakin burned up sitting on the edge of his bed. This is, I don't know if that's actually what we're going
I
to
mean,
see,
we're
but
I not only I think we're going to see in Kenobi. Think about this, conceptualize this, right? I think we're going to see in Kenobi not only Anakin in the bacta tank, but you realize every day of Anakin's Darth Vader prosthetic life, they
mhm,
put all that shit back onto him, and
mhm,
every day they took it all off again.
yeah,
Every single day. And I think we're going to see them do that in Kenobi.
mhm,
Can you
yeah,
imagine? Can you imagine? Can you imagine the agony? Right. I think, at the risk of alienating the rest of the chat, right? Even further than I already have, right? Kenobi's inability to kill Anakin ever, right? Revenge of the Sith or otherwise,
mhm,
might have been the worst thing he ever did to Anakin,
yeah,
because it enabled this torture to go on over and over and over again. And I don't think we're going to see Vori's snide comment, right? I don't
mm,
think we're going to see "woe is me, Anakin, my life sucks, I can't believe they're putting all this shit on me again." I think we're going to see angry Anakin.
oh
And
yeah,
this is another day, and I've got to power through this shit, and I'm going to go out there and do what needs to be done.
mhm,
Right. And so it's quite gripping to me, actually, right? That the love that Kenobi had for Anakin, even at the lowest moments, right, ended up doing the most harm
yeah,
to the guy
it really
for the
did.
longest period of time. It's just heart-wrenching. That part of the
Mhm,
story to me is just absolutely heart-wrenching. And I don't think they do a great job of that, of showing that in A New Hope. I think they do a good job of showing that in Revenge of the Sith, when they make him into cybernetic Vader the first time on that table, right? But I think a lot of folks, myself included, right, conceptualize that as a one-time event,
mhm,
right? Okay, they put legs and arms on the guy. He was screaming in agony. They put a mask on his head. Oh, thank God, it's over. Right? Every single day, right?
mhm,
When we see him in the meditation chamber, it's not because that's where he sleeps, right? It's just because that's where he goes on the Star Destroyer, so people leave him the hell alone, right? When he needs to be alone with his thoughts, right? When it comes
Mhm.
time to sleep, they're taking all that shit off, and he's in a back to tank
Yeah.
every single day.
Yeah, and that's a actually really good point because when you think about it, when he first became Vader and first got into the costume, into his suit, uh, it, it had to be several times a day that he went through that because he was still scarring and healing. So several times a day having to go through the changing of everything. Whereas now at this point, it might just be once, maybe twice a day. But at first, it would have been several times a day that he had to go through that damn agony. And every time he goes through it, you can imagine he's thinking, oh, fucking Kenobi, I'm gonna get your ass. I'm gonna find you and I'm gonna get you. Like Maul, you cut me in half. I'm gonna get you. That's all Maul thought about was I'm gonna get Kenobi. I'm gonna get
I
Kenobi.
I will say I agree with you. Maul was very anti Kenobi,
Hmm.
right? And definitely held Kenobi responsible for a lot of things, right? But I think Maul always wanted to be, and I guess Anakin too, to an extent, right? But Maul always wanted to understand and be more than just a Jedi or a Sith, right? He wanted to really understand how, I think, how things worked, why they worked in a particular way, right? And how could he best manipulate all of that to his benefit? And oh, by the way, the next time I see Obi-Wan Kenobi, I'm gonna fucking murder him, right? Always on his mind too. I get it,
Yeah. Hmm.
right? And on all the points that they're making in the chat, yes, there is a part of Anakin's agony, which is certainly something that Palpatine exploited. And yes,
Oh yeah.
those prosthetics and the different ways in which they attached and everything that happened, and the suits, a proclivity to force to Sith lightning purposefully, and some of the other things in the way it was constructed, was to maintain his subservience, right, to the Emperor. I get all that. All I'm saying is that the catalyst for him to be in that situation in the first place was Obi-Wan Kenobi,
Hmm.
right? And then, hey, you make your bed, you got to kind of lie in it, right? So you cast lots with this son of a bitch, the Emperor, right? Who's now keeping you alive. And of course, we know Anakin did make some modifications to the suit himself and tried to do different things, primarily, I think, to make himself more lethal, right? And to make it more, more of his enhance his abilities and do different things, right? That helped him to function in a merciless fashion, right? But the whole chain of events and everything that was set into motion and how all that transpired, right, would have never come to pass if they had not had that meeting in Mustafar, right, in Revenge
Hmm.
of the Sith. And again, we're going to see it in Kenobi, I believe. Again, Kenobi's inability to end Anakin, because I still think, even as far as A New Hope, he believes he is responsible for Anakin, and I don't think he's ever forgiven himself for that.
Mm-mm. I think that's probably one of the biggest parts of his PTSD is how could he forgive himself? He did that to him, and this was someone that he truly loved, even though he knew he had turned evil. You know, he felt he just felt for him because he knew him. He not as Vader, but as Anakin, and I don't know. Is
Well, I think that's why
I,
Kenobi
I'm reading the chat as we're talking, and
That's why
it's
Kenobi
yeah,
compartmentalizes the way he addresses Luke, right,
yeah,
about Darth Vader versus Anakin Skywalker, and even
hmm,
appearing to Luke as a Force ghost subsequent, right,
yeah,
and still conversing about more machine man, more machine now than man, twisted and evil, and some other things.
hmm,
That's Kenobi compartmentalizing the
hmm,
physical attributes, right, of Darth Vader from the person he knew of as Anakin Skywalker, right? And I
Hmm.
mean, you know, my personal opinions about Return of the Jedi as a movie aside, no one can dispute that the redemption arc, right, that Anakin goes through in the end of that movie, and the way all of that culminates, you know, with Luke being unable, obviously, to also end Anakin's existence, and rightly so, right? I think that has a very fulfilling end
Hmm.
to that story, right? But again, going back to it, right? I don't know how this became a conversation about Kenobi. I guess all Star Wars conversations
All Star Wars.
something to do with Kenobi, right? But I mean, I think when we think about Kenobi, it's hard, right? It's really hard to think about the character critically, right? And how he progressed to the point that we eventually see him at in A
Hmm.
New Hope, and how these other stories may help flesh that out. To me, I think it'll be very interesting, and I truly believe they're going to tell a very fulfilling story in the Kenobi series.
I hope so. Oh gosh, I really hope so. Um, I can't deal with it if they screw up Kenobi. I will not be able to deal with it. And I mean that. Because Kenobi is one of my favorite characters.
Many
He
people's
is
favorite characters,
one
yeah.
of my favorites. And I mean, you can go back to when you were a kid and when you had, all the figures. Kenobi wasn't one that you played with a whole lot, but he was essential to have because he played such an important role. Uh, so, he's always been there, so to speak. But yeah, and I think one thing that people are forgetting too, and I've brought this up before, but I'd like to get your take on it. Everybody keeps saying that Kenobi only has one mission after Revenge of the Sith, and that was to protect Luke. But Yoda also gave him some training, and which would also could also convert into a mission, which is to learn how to commune with Qui-Gon and essentially how to become a Force ghost. Now, if you go back to season 6 of the Clone Wars, Yoda went through all of that training and he did all of it and went through the whole path of it. Uh, I think that could be a very good and easy way that we see Kenobi and Vader fight, and it won't interrupt the timeline. It won't piss anybody off. It won't screw anything up because as he's going through that training, if anyone remembers season 6, Yoda goes through and he fights himself, who he doesn't recognize, but it's not himself; it's his dark side, and he finally accepts it, and he's able to defeat him. And then in the last episode, he goes through and Palpatine senses his presence and gets Dooku to come in there and uses what is that, Sith magic,
Mm.
basically, and stirs the cauldron and gets some drops of um, Dooku's blood, puts in there and creates this whole thing. And Yoda's like, "Oh, where are we?" And to Yoda, it's real. And he ends up fighting Palpatine at, well, Sidious, and almost lost Anakin there. And Sidious tells him, "Hey, if you let him go now, you can prevent all of my plans for the future." And Yoda says, "No, I can't let him go. I'm not going to let him go." And he they fight, and then it ends, whatever. But I think they could do that same thing to a degree in this, and make it to where while Kenobi is learning how to become a Force ghost, become one with the Force, and still present himself afterwards. I think that would be a good way to do it and not piss people off. It's already established, you know?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things, right? I think also not only did Yoda learn how to become a Force ghost, right? But unless I'm mistaken, we saw Qui-Gon manifest as a Force ghost in the Mortis arc, right? In Clone Wars
Yeah,
also.
only on the Mortis, only on
Mhm.
Mortis. That's the only place we saw him, but that was because Mortis was created by the three original Force users, which were father, daughter, and son. But that's the only place you ever saw him manifest himself.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways to look at it, right? You can look at it situationally and the fact that something like an event like that could only happen in the presence of those folks on Mortis, or you could say that someone's personal attunation to the force, right, circumstantially, could assist with that manifestation, right? If you already have a connection with them in some way. I don't
Mhm.
know, right? I think it's very likely we're going to see a manifested Force Ghost apparition of Qui-Gon in Kenobi, which people also object to. For me personally, Kenobi and Vader meeting again for real, or I should say before A New Hope for real, potentially portrayed in this series, wouldn't upset me greatly dependent on the context, right? I
Yeah,
think I would be, or I am quite against it if for some reason an in-person meeting occurs on Tatooine, which I don't think they're going to do, by the way.
I don't either. I don't think Vader would touch Tatooine.
I don't, there's not only because he has a personal history with the planet that's quite distasteful, but because I think he believes, based upon that history, that there's absolutely no reason to go back there,
Mhm.
right? That there would be nothing going on there. So in some ways, right, you might argue that the same way that the Sidious hid right under the noses of the Jedi on Coruscant, Kenobi used a bit of that same playbook, right, by hiding sort of under Anakin's own nose, if you will, in Tatooine, on Tatooine, right? But I wouldn't be surprised if we get a couple of meetings between Obi-Wan and Vader. I wouldn't be surprised if one of them was either in a vision or a dreamlike sequence that occurs
Mhm.
after their meeting in person, right? Because I personally have always believed that Kenobi encountered Vader and understood Vader as Anakin previous to A New Hope.
Mhm.
And I don't see any other way that that would have happened if it wasn't in person, because it's not like, Kenobi's at the bar on Tatooine and the TV's on and they put up a picture of Vader and Kenobi looks at the TV and says, "Well, fuck, that's Anakin. That's Anakin in a
Mhm.
black suit." I don't think any
Yeah.
of that happened, right?
Mm-mm.
So I personally believe that something will happen contextually within the story
Mhm.
that I think when it's portrayed, folks will be okay with it, and the dialogue that they have
Yeah.
will be especially rewarding for certain reasons, right? In
Mhm.
regards to his mission, I agree with you. I think even Yoda did say, right, I have training for you. You should
Mhm.
commune with Qui-Gon. You should watch after Luke. And and then Yoda says something like, and I'm paraphrasing, he's like, disappear now we must until needed are we.
Mhm.
Until the time is right. So until there's something that we need to do, right? And a lot of people say that for Kenobi, there was only two things that he's ever needed to do from that point till the end of time. And in this
Yeah.
case, the end of time is either he perishes or Luke distinguishes himself in such a way, or the threats surrounding Luke dissipate so that he can consider that mission fulfilled, right? And for me, I have always thought, because with the exception of Yoda and Bail Organa, right, it's only
Mm.
Kenobi, right, who understands who Leia is and where Leia is at this
Mhm.
point, and I suppose Bail's wife, potentially Bail's sister, I suppose, if she ends up being in the series, as it seems she is.
Mhm.
But in any event, right, I think if Leia was under peril and/or if Bail reached out to Kenobi and said, "I need you,"
Mhm. I
I
think Kenobi would be there. Yeah.
I because again, and Coach makes a great point about this, right? In regards to how we even see Kenobi in A New Hope, and you could argue, or some people then say, well, he was just saying that he knew Luke was coming all the time, right? But at least before the point where Beru and Owen are massacred, right? And they're trying to figure out how to get Kenobi where he needs to be. Kenobi was leaving, right?
Mhm.
Kenobi was leaving to fulfill the mission that Leia gave to him. Again, Leia gave him that mission, right? Via R2. Luke was facilitating his ability to participate in
Mhm.
that mission. Again, at that moment, Kenobi was going, Luke was staying. An argument could be made that Kenobi was abandoning his mission if his only mission was to protect Luke. Ostensibly, by that point, he'd learned how to commune with Qui-Gon. Let's just assume,
Mhm.
right? And again, we turn of events. We know it all worked out. They left together.
Yeah.
Obviously, Kenobi continued to protect Luke, through the events of A New Hope in both the physical and the aphysical form, right? But that's why I say that the strict canon constructionists who believe there are certain things that cannot be interpreted, to me, it almost becomes a very biblical conversation, literally, right?
Mhm.
In how you see these things, and I get it, right? And I respect it, right? And I understand it, and I'm totally fine with that viewpoint, right? Where I run into a problem in these kinds of conversations is when you express an opposing viewpoint conceptually to this. Sometimes the reaction is, "You're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't understand Star Wars canon. You're not a real fan. Fuck you." Right? I'm not going to talk to you anymore because you
Yeah.
don't know the story. Right? And that's when my tail goes up, right? And
Mhm.
I get a little ornery about it. It's like, because we can have different opinions, right? And if it means that you don't want to watch Kenobi because you believe he shouldn't have left the planet in the first, I mean, how many strikes, right?
Yeah.
Seeing Qui-Gon as a ghost, leaving the planet, you know what I mean? All boom, 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 all these, seeing Vader in person, right? All of these,
Mhm.
being broken at the beginning. My goodness, it's 5 or 6 strikes, right? By all counts, a lot of people shouldn't watch the series at all,
Yeah.
right? So that's where I'm like, I get my heart gets a little heavy as a Star Wars fan when it seems like, some folks are so shut down to even giving it a shot, understanding and I hoping that a lot of people will watch it anyway and that we'll all enjoy it together. It makes conversing about it difficult sometimes, right? Because
Yeah.
people are very passionate about these topics, and I think passion is great but passion very quickly turns to nastiness, and that's what I have a problem with.
Yeah. Me too. It should never turn nasty, especially we're all Star Wars fans, y'all. But there are two lines that people always grasp onto, and you know the two lines. Everybody here, I'm sure, knows the two lines from the movies, the original trilogy, that always say, "Oh, if they go against that, then this, and that." But if it's it's a presence I haven't felt since. That's one line, and he just drags it off. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the last time he felt that presence was on Mustafar.
And then his clarification isn't really clarifying, right?
It's not.
He says in the presence of my old master, right? Understanding that the person that he's addressing, based upon everything we now know, right? He
Mhm.
was having this conversation with Tarkin. Tarkin's seen a lot of this shit firsthand.
Yeah.
Tarkin knew who he was conversing with,
Mhm.
right? And so you're right, and I think the problem is because there hasn't really been anything in the middle. People then say what he's referring to has to be the last time they met in Revenge of the Sith, right? Understanding that when that line was originally spoken, there was no Revenge of the
There
Sith,
was none. Yeah. Mhm.
right? And so it would have been, that's why to me a more interesting phenomenon would have been if they met in Rebels somehow,
Mhm.
right? And obviously you see the way that Filoni chose to tell that story and whatever, it didn't happen, right? I mean,
Mhm.
and he didn't even really, you know what I mean? It wasn't even hinted at, right? And instead, we have a very gripping interaction between Vader and Ahsoka, right? You
Mhm.
might argue that the interaction we did get in Rebels with Vader might have even been more heartbreaking,
Yeah.
right, than if Vader had interacted with Kenobi in that series. So I'm not for a moment complaining about what we did get in Rebels, right? But on the point you're making in regards to the dialogue in A New Hope, a lot of people can't or won't subscribe to the fact that he was referring to an event that might be depicted in Kenobi because Kenobi is not written by George Lucas.
Mhm.
Because the Kenobi series is not written by George Lucas and ostensibly not commissioned or certified by George Lucas in any way, people feel like that that invalidates their opportunity to expand upon that story because they're usurpers of the franchise. And
Mhm.
again, I've been, especially in After Night's Dreams, right? I've been quite
Mhm.
critical of that viewpoint. It's not that I don't understand it, it's that this is the situation we have been put into by the creator of the franchise, right? And so
Mhm.
for me personally, I have to move past that fact and try and reconcile what I am getting in the storytelling that we're receiving with an interpretation that I feel like is legitimate.
Yeah.
And so, but again, that is a big reason why, again, some folks that maybe that's the sixth one, maybe I left that one out.
I don't know.
There's so many reasons why strict canon constructionists of Star Wars canon are very opposed to the Kenobi series, and it has nothing to do with the fact that the Grand Inquisitor looks like an egghead,
Yeah.
right? It has to do very, very topically and very deeply with interpretation of the canon. And
Mhm.
I think we probably gave Phil a heart attack, and he's gone at
Yeah,
this moment.
I
But,
think
but
so.
this is the hill that Phil McCracken is currently dying on, right? The
Mhm.
interpretation of the canon events of New Hope.
Mhm.
Um, I get it, right? He's not going to change his mind. I'm not going to change my mind. I think
Mhm.
that's okay, right?
Yeah.
I think we can all be great Star Wars fans with different viewpoints on it. And so, what was the other line of dialogue you were thinking of? When he got
Uh, when he says, "When last we met, I was
oh
but the learner and you were the master." Was isn't that the line?
yeah, now
Uh,
I'm the master. Yeah, now I'm the master, and Kenobi
yeah.
Kenobi throws back only
Uh,
a master of evil. And
yeah. Well,
so
my point on that though is we don't know necessarily that he's referring to Obi-Wan. He could be referring to he was a new learner in the Sith ways, and you know now he is a master of the Sith ways. Yeah, that's what interpret that as.
I
Uh, for
I
me, it's never broken canon. Uh, if anything happens outside, it's not breaking canon because at that point he was no longer Anakin. He was Vader. He was learning the ways of the Sith, of the dark side of the Force. So he was a learner.
I think if there's one thing Anakin realized by the point of that interaction, again, going back to his experience every day of getting arms and legs attached and the agony of the suiting, etc., is he still had an awful lot to learn about a great many things,
Hmm.
right? At the time of Revenge of the Sith, right? And probably even when if they do meet in person in Kenobi, right? I think there's still some things he's learning about and all of that, mainly because both of them are very rusty at that point, right? Neither one of them has probably encountered an opponent with that kind of a skill. But I'm with you on the context of the comment, I don't think it necessarily that Dave Bob's another one probably ready to tar and feather us, right?
Right.
I don't think it necessarily has to be in the context of their relationship specifically, although I do think Anakin is telling him, "You're not going to fool me with no high ground bullshit this time."
Yeah.
Right? But I mean, I think he has had a lot of time to hone his skills as a Sith Lord
Mhm.
and to really come into his element in how best to conduct himself with the most ferociousness, right, and lethalness, given the confines that Anakin finds himself, working under as he endeavors to wield the Force as Darth Vader. And I think that bravado that we hear him state there is really it's like it is like when you meet an old when you meet an old teacher and you didn't used to do good in their class, right? You
Mhm.
meet them and you meet them later in life and you're very successful now in your field. Perhaps it's even the field of of that material, right? You're very happy to tell them, right, how far you've come, generally speaking, personally, professionally, you know, how you've matured. And of course, in some ways, you want certification one way or the other, or acknowledgement from the other party, right, that they agree with you. Um, Kenobi wasn't having any of that, right? I mean, and
Mhm.
that's why I think we see the sparkle in his eye, right? Of Sith Lords are a speciality, right? And some of
Mhm.
the things now that we know they were famous for saying, although it turns out as he was uttering that very famous line, was addressing he was addressing a Sith Lord.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
ironic as we might say, but you get the point, right? Again, the strict canon constructionists would say, just based alone on the dialogue, whether it's Vader and Tarkin, whether it's Vader and Kenobi, as depicted in the New Hope, it's an open and shut case, right? In regards
Yeah.
to what it means, what it doesn't mean, what it allows, and what it doesn't allow. I'm just excited to see the story that they tell. And if the story they tell is shitty and it's full of holes and it's
Ugh.
representational for all the wrong reasons, and we feel the characters have been disrespected both in their portrayal and in the way in which they were asked to act, then I'll be right there with everyone else and
Yeah.
shouting appropriately in outrage because of how they've desecrated these much beloved characters, right?
Yeah.
And I'll be very disappointed in Ewan McGregor, personally.
Mhm. Oh, hell yeah. And, you know, I just don't want them to more beloved. Kenobi is way more beloved than Boba ever. So, they did shit with Boba Fett, but I, I really don't think that they're going to do that with Kenobi. I don't think they can. And I keep telling everybody this. This is my what I go back to. We shit on Disney Star Wars because overall the majority of it is shit, but they have given us good stuff too.
We we
Rogue
we
One.
shit we shit on Disney Star Wars for two very specific reasons: the sequels
Yeah.
and Kathleen Kennedy's bedside manner. Right. Those two
Yeah.
things, and it's happening right here in the chat, right? And I get it, right? And
Mhm.
that's another reason why, some folks very specifically and vocally, and I get it, are already also. I mean, that's a seventh reason why people are checked out, are checked out on Kenobi and believing that the series has any merit at all or has any opportunity to exceed expectations. And it's a tough one for me, right? Because I agree with you that that Star Wars under Disney has had some very good content, right?
Mhm.
The sequels was not good content,
No,
right? The Book of Boba Fett was a wasted opportunity,
a waste of
right?
time.
It was a story that I don't feel like needed to be told in the way it was told.
Nope.
And I have to say honestly, I don't think that story got told in a poor way because Kathleen Kennedy or anyone else was maniacally whiling away their time in the corner saying, how can we really fuck this character up? I think it's Jon Favreau oversaw a bad story. And whether that's because he concocted the story and it played out exactly the way he intended, whether that's because he was partially checked out doing other things and he relied on others to carry the story forward, and just by the time he checked back in, it was too late or what, I don't know.
Mhm.
But for many folks, there are some folks who really liked the Book of Boba Fett, by the way.
Yeah, there are.
It maintains its place on high watched hours, right? From a Disney Plus standpoint. The statistics the statistics also say that less sweaty or more normie Star Wars fans really like the Book of Boba Fett for various reasons, and that if you had to name one of the recent projects, whether that in those I put either the sequels or the High Republic or Book of Boba Fett slash Mandalorian, right? The Book of Boba Fett and the Mandalorian is creating new Star Wars fans,
Mhm.
right? And so my personal distaste for the Book of Boba Fett aside, it is somewhat encouraging to see some of this stuff resonating with folks who aren't newer Star Wars fans, right? The problem is we want to be fulfilled as older Star Wars fans, and I don't mean
Mhm.
ancient old farts like us, right? I mean folks who have been with the franchise for a long time. I don't know what to do about the sequels, right? Last night in Boomer Council, there was a lot of sequels talk
Yeah.
again, and there was analogies being made between, Luke's journey, such as it was in The Last Jedi, and what people believe Kenobi's journey might be in the Kenobi series, and it became quite off-putting, not only to people on the panel, but to people who were watching the screen.
Oh, yeah.
This was not intentional, right? It just, it's just for me, I've moved past the sequels, right? And
Mhm.
I have very specific opinions about parts of the sequels that I do think tell Star Wars story. Again, I personally think The Last Jedi tells more of a Star Wars story than any of the other two nonsense that J.J. Abrams put out. I'm not for a moment saying that I think The Last Jedi is a good Star Wars movie. I'm just saying that from a story's perspective,
It's the most original.
yeah, something was cobbled together, right, to try and do something with closure and all the rest of it, right? This whole business and JJ and the dick measuring contest and what happened and the rest of it, I squarely put, from a management's perspective on poor management, right? But I think when it comes right down to it, say what you want about Kathleen Kennedy and what you believe she is or isn't good at, and how you do or don't think she's involved in the content that's being produced at this moment. She wants to make the company money,
Mhm.
right? And so far, it's been proven that The Mandalorian makes money, and the Book of Boba Fett seemed to generate viewership, right? Although I don't think it's generated much additional buzz, right? The series kind of ended, and everyone's like, "Thank." Some of us are like, "Thank God," right?
Thank God, yeah.
A lot of folks who continue to talk about it, right? I think Kenobi will generate a lot of dialogue, a lot of ongoing conversation, hopefully good
Mhm.
conversation, right? And I think that will bolster, some of the franchise. I I think things that happen at Celebration are going to be hugely beneficial for the Star Wars franchise right now, and I think it's going to cause a lot of the mojo to come back as in a very supportive way, right? Because not only did we stop movies, but we stopped a lot of those fan events, whether officially commissioned or otherwise, right? When the
Mhm.
pandemic rolled in, and so for a time, the only thing that we had sustaining the franchise was The Mandalorian or offline content, whether it be High Republic or whether it be comic runs, which again, I think there are stories being told in comics that haven't resonated with broad tranches of Star Wars fans, right? Because not
Mhm.
not a significant number of folks read the comics, nor do a lot of people believe in that they're hugely canonical. And I think that there isn't a great plan for how all those stories fit together either, right? But all I'm saying is the vacuum was filled in a very particular way, and they've sort of spoon fed us content since then. And I'll be very curious to see what happens again. All these panels and all these people now who are showing at the celebration, that
Mm-hmm.
I never would have expected to show up, right? They're bringing it. My God, they're bringing Admiral Akbar out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
talk about talking. I mean, we've had him on Echo Base.
surprised.
I thought
Yeah.
that I would never do anything for Star Wars again, despite the fact that he protested a continued love of the franchise, right? And they got Tim Rose attending, right? Now
Hmm.
they've got the communications officer for Moff Gideon's ship.
Yeah.
Can't come into the. I don't know. All these people are going to be on a panel, right? But they're attending. I saw Sam Witwer's going to be there now. I mean, they
Yeah.
are they are pulling out all the stops from an attendee
Hmm.
perspective for celebration, and I think we're going to get a much more cohesive release of information at that event that people will be quite satisfied with, and it's rolling with the Kenobi release or whatever. I think they I think they would never, and maybe they're just being arrogant, I don't know, but I think they would never risk a Kenobi floppo with screaming at fucking celebration. I think there's very little chance that they would take that risk.
Yeah. I don't think I'm with you on that one. I don't think they would take that much of a risk.
So again, I
No.
don't. Having said all that, right? I think for me, I find the Rebels content to be very satisfying content that was produced during the reign of terror that is known as Disney Star Wars, right? And again,
Hmm.
I think it shows, and it was written. Get the story, the infamous story group
Yeah.
epitomized by that blowhard Pablo Hidalgo, who's constantly being fired,
Yeah.
rising
What the
from the
hell?
ashes and being fired, right? They're bringing Doug Chang out, right? Doug Chang's going to be at
Yeah. I
Celebration,
saw
right?
that.
So we have to remember that behind the scenes at Lucasfilm, other than the ones that we have chosen to crucify again and again and again to the same old crosses, there are still very dedicated employees at Lucasfilm who
Mhm.
have a deep love of this franchise and who have loved the franchise, some of them still since its inception or very near to it, right? And I think I think there's just sometimes there I feel a real lack of respect for those folks who are still out there designing buildings in Batu. Maybe we never wanted it to be Batu, but they were designing the best goddamn Star Wars buildings they could put together, right? With the money they were given and the theming and everything, there's just so much that goes into it. If you ever watch some of these behind the scenes or some of these offline
Mhm.
interviews or some of these other little unknown things that don't just get echoed out to us, right, or aren't pushed out to us in a way that brings wide appeal, that it's just a shame to me when it always just comes back to Hidalgo shouldn't be on Twitter and Kennedy sucks.
Yeah, and it's bigger than just those two. You know, it's there's more to it than just those two. Uh, They might run the Lucasfilm portion, but Disney owns it. So essentially, Disney has the final say, no matter what anybody else says. And I think we lose sight of all that, especially when we play the blame game. And by no means do I have any love at all for Kathleen Kennedy or Pablo Hidalgo. I think they're both assholes. They're both uh, fucking bags of shit. But you know, I the old adage, "'Tis better the devil you know," because if either one of them left, the devil that we don't know would be who fills their spot. Sometimes it is better the devil that you know. So,
And on that point, I'd rather give Jon Favreau a pass for writing what I felt like was an unfulfilling story in the Book of Boba Fett than to
mhm,
have no Jon Favreau at all.
exactly. Because we know he writes good shit, right? We know he's
Yeah,
good at writing shit and directing and overseeing all of it. Yeah, everybody fucks up from time to time. I mean, which was
yeah,
it?
I know.
Was it Iron Man 2 or Iron Man 3 that was just fucking horrible? So,
Oh, I mean, so many of those early Marvel movies are so forgettable, right? And to this
yeah.
day, I'm not a huge Iron Man fan just because I never liked the original movies, right? You don't hook me in the beginning and you keep bringing the character out, even though I cared for him much more in an ensemble cast, right?
Mhm.
I really never cared for the Iron Man character as portrayed in Marvel until we guess what was it? I guess it must have been Civil War, right? Until he started interacting with other folks leading up to the Avengers, he just never did it for me, right? And
Yeah.
so, but again, that's again, it just goes to finding your footing. You know, there's been
Mhm.
so many Marvel movies right now, and
Yeah.
we can wax rhapsodic about whether we think they are or aren't doing a good job with the television stuff that they have out there now. But they've had a lot of time to figure out what works and what doesn't work. Maybe Sony will never figure it out, right? But at least Marvel under Kevin Feige has had a lot of time to figure that out, right? And we've had a lot of upheaval and topsy turviness, if you will, from a Star Wars standpoint. And I feel like it's just now, right, with the inception of The Mandalorian, which is still a very new show, right, even after
Mhm.
2 seasons, and just creatively where it's going. So I have high hopes for Celebration. I'm excited to go to some of these other cons. I'm going to go to MegaCon in Orlando in May, just because I happened coincidentally to be have an Orlando trip planned, and then all of a sudden they sprung up this ginormous MegaCon with all the Hobbit actors going to be there, and Brendan
Mhm.
Fraser and Gina Carano is going to be there, and there's some Star Wars. There's some of the big Star Wars actors as well, completely unaffiliated, right? It's a separate event, but all this stuff now is coming back with gusto, right? And I think we've seen historically it's all necessary to maintain the momentum of this fandom, and so I'm very
Mhm.
excited to see where it's going to go now over the next couple of months.
Yeah, me too. I can't wait. Oh my god.
Because
Daryl.
he has antibody, yes. These jokes are so
Daryl. Oh my god.
it's so bad.
That's my partner,
You
y'all.
just have to laugh, right? They're so bad,
That's my
so very
partner.
bad.
And let me tell you, when he's not streaming, it's the same. The corny jokes, everything. He's the exact same. So there's no change there. But so uh that wraps it up, you guys. I think that was a great conversation. We didn't really.
Did we ever solve the unsolvable question about which animated series is better, or do we acknowledge that they're both great for their own reasons, and it's a bit of personal
Yeah.
preference, right, as to which
Yeah.
one we
Yeah.
think might be better or worse?
We'll end on we have signed a treaty and nobody wins. It's equal.
We both win.
Equal footing. We
Yep,
both win.
yep, everybody wins. Let's just say
Everybody
everybody wins as
wins.
opposed to
As
nobody.
long as you get such good writing as Clone Wars and Rebels, everybody wins. Everybody wins with that. So I still think Clone Wars is better, but
Just had to get that last dig in, right?
I gotta
It's
get
your
it in there.
channel. I'll allow it. It's your channel. I'll just have to let it go.
Hey, Valiant and Terry. It just skipped on me. We
They
both
both suck.
they both suck. No, okay, no one wins. So, with that, Matt, do you have anything coming up? What you got going on
No,
inside
no. I
mod
mean,
from modding
you
everywhere?
can normally just find me in the chat, so it's always a pleasure to actually be able to speak and not type. Right? I might make another cameo appearance in an X-wing late night stream this weekend. Some that flying around here, if there is one. But always a pleasure to be invited to come on and just enjoyed the conversation. And thanks to everyone who stuck with us. Not Phil McCracken though. We lost him. We
Yeah,
lost
we
him as soon as
lost
I started with the satanic verses. Right, he was out of here.
him. He was gone.
So sorry. I think he'll be back. Right. I
Uh,
don't think he's permanently gone. But really, really
he'll be back because I mean he proposed to me like what 3 times yesterday.
nice.
I think Daryl was there. I think he proposed like 3 times. I don't know,
Very
but
cool. Very cool.
so Daryl says cherry vodka is amazing. We know. Oh my god. Okay, you two are going crazy. So with that, Saturday, 2 p.m. the back two will be there talking about toxic masculinity and
Oh
why we
dear.
need it. It is a good thing, y'all. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Toxic masculinity is a good thing. Women appreciate it. Real women. Anyway. And then Tuesday and Wednesday right back here on my channel. You guys, thank you everyone for being here and supporting this and sticking with it. And thank you, Matt, for coming and having this great conversation. And you guys all remember there are still kind people in this world. And if you can't find one, then be one. I love y'all.
Horrible.
Bye.
Bye, y'all. See you.